Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spark AI Show. Today, we're on episode 10. And really, again, just for those of you that may be new to the show, one of the things that we try to do here at the Spark AI Show is help inform the accounting profession of sort of what's going on with AI, generative AI in particular, within the industry, and also just do what we can to promote AI literacy and adoption within your accounting firms, right? So there's a lot going on, a lot of changes, and whether it's just sharing news or like we have today, sharing with a guest and interviewing them to see sort of what's going on in their world, that's the goal of the Spark AI Show. So we hope that you can take some nuggets from this and better understand AI at the end of the day. Today we've got Guy Pearson with us from Ignition. So, hey, Guy, how's it going?
Good, TJ. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we were able to secure a few minutes with you while you're stateside. I know we're kind of in the middle of fall conference season, so things are a little bit crazy with schedules and all that. But I appreciate you carving out some time for us.
No problems. I'm based in Austin today, but jumping in between West and East Coast on conference season, as you pointed out. So
yeah,
glad we could schedule this in.
And I know for us, obviously I'm here in the States, and for me, I live in Bloomington, Indiana, and that 4-hour flight over to the West Coast is just, a dog. And but I'm sure that bouncing east to west for you is not too big of a deal, given it's not the 20-hour flight from Australia, right?
Yeah, I think we deem it more as a chip shot, rather than the drive off the tee. So it is definitely a lot closer. It's also nice not to have to go through TSA each time and explain why I'm in the country again. But thank you for having me. I always appreciate the warm welcome post the TSA level.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I'm excited about today is it's always good to get some product folks in the room, because I think, the firms that I talk to, day in and day out, are trying to figure out AI, right? We're almost to the day, 2 years on from the launch of ChatGPT and sort of what that did to the world, and kind of set it a little bit on fire with what is generative AI and what does this mean for my business. And so, trying to get some perspective from you and sort of how you think about the world as it relates to generative AI and what that's done to the product. So I always like hearing the perspective from the product folks and what they're thinking about. So I'd love to have you, Guy, just kind of do a little bit of an introduction today for our audience. Just tell me a little bit about you, sort of a little bit of your background and where you came from. What are your roles and responsibilities there at Ignition?
Yeah, sure. So Guy, I'm from Australia. I hail from Sydney. I'm a recovering CPA. So I spent about a decade working for other firms in public practice, that's what we call it back home, but like working in CPA firms that file taxes, do financials for small, medium businesses, charities, foundations, etc. Did a leg around the world, which is a very Australian thing to do, as I saw technology in 2009 kind of coming to life. So I did a very non-CPA thing, and I spent all of my savings going to Africa, Europe, and North America. Non-CPA, but very Australian thing to do. And then came back home. This is all just after the GFC. Came back home, worked at a brewery at night, pouring beers, and started an accounting firm called Interactive Accounting, which was sort of one of the first almost purely cloud shops in the world. In the end of 2009, early 2010, I just had a desktop tax software, which probably resonates with a bunch of folks on this call. Everything else was in the cloud. So that's about 15 years ago now. How do I look after the next generation of entrepreneur in Australia? We already had banking online, the ATO, our IRS was online. And so for me, the phone piece and the story of the accounting journey was just the middle piece that needed to move into the cloud. We did a recurring revenue subscription-based model for everything that was recurring. We had estimates and minimums and maximums for advisory work. And we very much got right into the realm of how do we do forecasts, KPIs, OKRs, benchmarking for clients. And we centered in on e-commerce and software. As a result of that, I got really jealous of the way that their businesses ran. So they had contract that tied into what happened next. So launching you into an application whilst their accounts receivable and marketing messaging and everything was automatically updated. Whereas the smart people in the room, being the CPA, could not do such a thing. And so I had a whole bunch of different cloud apps with concatenate G sheets, which is like string-based URLs. So field, generates URL, which then if you have a branded landing page can pre-populate it. Mm-hmm. And that was seen as fairly forward thinking in 2010. But it really drove me nuts. Now, the firm growth went like this as we got really good at going to market, helping those clients run better businesses. And I wanted to therefore build software to help solve some of the problems. Ignition's my fifth company. My accounting firm is Interactive Accounting, is now called Sender. That was my first. And Ignition was, for me, the problem that would be solved that would help hopefully change the way CPAs interact with their clients by solving their biggest problem, which is contract, lining up with what tasks need to be done and that being in sync. Billing, once again, tied to contracts, so you charge for everything that you agreed to charge for, and then the collection process and accounts receivable management, so you get paid for it all. If you do that, then you can spend more time focusing on your clients, your levels of services, make changes within your firm, but ultimately you're not borrowing money from a bank to keep the company afloat, your company specifically, but also you understand how your business runs. And that was kind of the whole thing. And then we spent a good 10 years building a very sophisticated billing contracts platform, candidly, so that you can have multiple different timelines for different workflows with different billing frequencies and collection frequencies all on the one digital contract with no audit trail, with change variables and price increases and everything all built in. So you have that, and then we'll get to where we're going, but like effectively that's the baseline for what comes next, which is super exciting. It's almost like the end of the first year of Ignition. In addition to that, so CPA builds software to help CPAs run a better practice and help their clients if they're a good fit for our product. Then takes his 401k or self-managed super fund, if you happen to be dialing from Australia, and then turns that into a mini VC fund, and then starts investing in the tech that's in the ecosystem to help drive the change. So I think I've made 50 investments, half of which have been in accounting tech, a big chunk more recently in AI. And I don't know, for me, it's all a logical path, but I just love seeing innovation in the space. And ultimately, probably like you all I wanted to do was help small businesses and families get better information faster, to make better decisions, to either give more money to charities, spend more time with their families, or buy their dream car, house, go on a family holiday. So for me, it all is a straight line and all makes sense. I'm sure from the outside in, I seem like a crazy person. But very excited that, we're 11 years old. The US is now our biggest customer base.
Nice.
We manage the most number of client relationships. So it's about 500,000 between CPAs and their clients every year here in the US. And our team is growing here. So we're about 60 odd in North America. We've got a big chunk of our team in Canada. Something about the Commonwealth being from Australia just kind of made that easier. And we're now starting to deploy more folks here in the US as well. So roles and responsibilities, CEO, so strategy. And I get involved in marketing, given my background, and product as well, and sort of CX, with very much sort of strategy, where are we going? And then I get a pulled motion in on all the other functions. We hired a president earlier this year, Greg, who's based in San Francisco. Greg has a background as COO at Box, Product Board, Periscope Data, Louis, and candidly is one of the nicest humans you'll ever meet. Ace in the hole for us is that he works from home, and his wife, Tara, I haven't sharing too much, Greg, is a CPA.
Oh, nice.
So he gets to turn around and see UltraTax and practice CS on a VPN window, QBD, QBO, Office 365 at a shoebox. And candidly, this is all like week one. He was sort of like, how? And now they've had their children kind of back to back, which is awesome. But as a result, he was sort of like, why hasn't this changed since before we started having kids? Like, it feels like the VPN window was the only new thing. And he was sort of flabbergasted. So he just sees a huge opportunity, as do I, to help CPAs, or his partner in crime in life, run and work for a better business that operates in a more, how would you put it, streamlined fashion, so they can help clients more. So hopefully that's clear. Greg looks after the execution of all the plan. He is, way smarter and more talented than I am in terms of this software motion. This is the first software company I've ever worked for, the largest business I've ever worked for. And so there's just certain things that you kind of realize that are outside, not your pay grade, but like your experience set. So for me, have offloaded a bunch of responsibilities, and now I can be more strategic and help our company succeed more. While I've got someone who is way better at running the how and being a leader of leaders as the company is growing, etc. Just something someone else is better off doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what I heard you say is, sort of when you started your accounting firm, you were sort of cloud native, right? So you were cloud first. So you didn't have to solve for many of the problems that other people had to solve for and transition into that maybe had started their firm in the 90s or early 2000s, or you got to solve for them right up front, right? You didn't have to deal with the baggage of the switch.
So I'll tell you a story. So I came back after the travel, and GFC meant that I'd lost a bunch of money that I'd saved whilst I was spending it, right? So was a good accountant, had them mutual funds or managed funds, and so you had limitations on your withdrawals, but your balance was going down. Not exactly a fun experience, but as a result, I came back with way less money than I thought I was going to. So I actually borrowed money. Funny thing in life, I borrowed money to buy the rights to a client base of a retiring CPA back home. He was on something called Lotus Notes, which I'm not even sure ever made it here. It may have my 80s and early 90s software. Okay, there you go. So Lotus Notes, if you're familiar, the printer that had the track pull thing, and lots of handwritten ledgers. And so my first clients, I was also still under a bit of a non-compete with my prior firm. My first clients, before I kind of had all the marketing set up, were from this gentleman in Sydney. Now, I was 25, he was 75, Lotus Notes, desktop. And I had to deal with the conversion conversation of transitioning clients from old software over to new software and new ways of doing things, and not in my own demographic. So, yes, I didn't have to transition a whole firm, but I learned very quickly the best way to get people to move off effectively paper and notes and whatnot was to hijack the data as much as possible and then present them the new experience. And I took it as learning, so I do it all for free because I wanted to figure out how to have that conversation on repetition and learn what they thought the positives were. So interestingly, for the older generation, it was not stressing about where the information was, and the next of kin wouldn't have to go find it if it was investments or businesses and other things. So it was all a centralized place, as opposed to being on paper or desktop software. So you could share the access. Mm-hmm. And the other piece was just reduction in workload. And then common piece that you're looking at, so the ledger specifically. Weirdly, that resonated way more with the 50 to 70-year-olds. And it was a harder piece at that time. So early 2010s for the 30 to 40-year-olds to get the head around because they felt like they were losing control.
Yeah.
Very interesting because I would have expected to be the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then I think, like many good products, your story about kind of how Ignition came out of the problems or the pain points that you were experiencing and sort of the vision that you had for how you wanted your business to operate. So those are always great stories, right? Where you sort of felt the pain and you said, well, all right, the best way to solve for it is to just do it myself the way that I want to do it. And I'm curious so you're still engaged with the firm, right? I'm
still an owner. I haven't been involved in the day-to-day, how to put this. So 2013, I handed it off to my business partners who I'd brought on board, and they went to go run that whilst I turned on my focus onto Ignition. So 11 years ago, and then I was brought back into the firm to help solve a few problems roughly 2018 for about 6 months. And then more recently, I'm now just a advisor. And they mostly look up to startups and scale-ups, venture funds, those sorts of things. And as you can probably imagine, I end up sort of being someone involved on the investor side or feedback side or someone to talk to on those things. But day to day, I no longer have access to my email account at that firm. I don't have access to the financials. I'm literally there as a passive shareholder and a helper if I need it.
Okay. That's awesome. So yeah, that's good. That's good background on sort of how you're still in the profession, in the industry, with all of the other things. And then you mentioned the other investments that you've got. So you're keeping your finger on the pulse through many of those as well.
Try to. So, if we're going to talk AI and switch it to that way. So ADA is out of New Zealand. So it's basically Gen AI report writing off the back of using data to do forecasting and analysis. So you can do CFO and fractional reporting and kind of doing the 80% of that for you out of the box. I was an early shareholder in MindBridge, which is AI for auditing, which is now owned by PSG. What else we got? And then I've got some other sort of slightly adjacent native platforms like Core, which is a CX platform, CX being customer success. It's just all AI to help you have a better post-sale experience. And then QuantFlow, which is out of Australia, and it's AI to do effectively be like JP Morgan was your pension fund, as an example. Like, what does it need to invest in to meet the rules of the fund and not lose money? And then how do we robo trade on all those things and keep, they have to keep certain percentages on certain categories of assets and whatnot. So it basically runs all the checks and automates the trades. Things like that. I'm very interested in how do you take good care of people's retirements on one side, and on the other side, it's how do you automate things that are critical in business process.
Yeah. So I think, we kind of alluded to or mentioned earlier that we're coming up on the 2-year sort of anniversary of the release of ChatGPT. Many of those companies that you just mentioned, obviously some of them have been around for a little while, and they kind of predate this generative AI wave, if you will. I'm curious how, so we've had, prior to generative AI, we've got machine learning, robotic process automation, right? They're AI as a concept is not new to us. It's just these different iterations over time. I'm curious just to get your take on how is generative AI, specifically the ChatGPT sort of format, if you will, this ability for, let's just say, normal people, right, to be able to interact with AI using natural language, right? Before that, it was you did have to have some sort of technical expertise or some technical know-how to be able to code or program your way into interacting with artificial intelligence. And now we've kind of reduced the barrier to a degree where pretty well anybody can engage with it in some way, shape, or form. How has that impacted? We'll keep it more broadly, but maybe Ignition and or the other companies that you work with over the last couple of years. How is generative AI impacting those companies?
So first and foremost, I think it goes into the written word. So let's use marketing as an example. So I think what it allows you to do is do the 80% of an article on a research topic, and then you kind of have to finish it off on 20%. So we rolled that out inside product on service descriptions, which was always one of the things that CPAs never described how they, or what the thing is that they market, the specifics, kind of gets them up and running. Internally, we use it, so you're going to laugh at this. One of my team has created a private GPT and dumped in all of my presentations, LinkedIn, my YouTube recordings, like things like what we're doing today, and has dumped all that in one spot. And so she's called it GPT. To try and use it to extract as much knowledge out of things that I've written and done in the past over, since running my accounting firm over the last 15 years into a centralized place, so that you can get the 80% started and reduce my time. So,
I want to poke in on that, not to, but I think that's such a good use case, right? And I think one of the things, especially as I talk to firms, right, the firm owner or the partner or the sort of leadership they are the ones that have so many different conversations, and they sort of have all of this stuff that lives in their head and they never get it out. So you have the benefit of, right, you talk, I'm sure with people, you present and those kinds of things. And they're sort of recorded and they're available. Our firm owners, our leaders, they don't necessarily record all those things. And so I think that's the first thing that people are realizing is like, oh, if I just had all this stuff recorded and I could dump it in and then be able to extract that information out of it, like how much further ahead could we be? My junior staff can then tap into my brain a little bit more, right? If it's just out there. So I think that's step one, is like it helps to have all that stuff recorded and out there available.
And it's so much easier these days, right? You've got all the different AI bots you can plug into, like a Zoom meeting or a Google Hangout.
Right.
Obviously, you can interlace it over your Office suite as well. And so, the hardest part becomes whether or not you're worried about the Cyberdyne thing and, Terminator's taking over. So, like, there's ways that you can make it secure as well. Right. And so all you're feeding off is your own data, and it's just reading that, but it's for you. It's not shared out to the public world, so to speak. And so I think there's a layer there around privacy, trust, all those sorts of things, IP, I guess. But if you don't think what you've done is, how would I put this? Like, your tone is important, but you're like anyone could do. Like I'm fairly low ego. I think anyone could kind of say what I've said candidly. Like for me, it's obvious, it's logical, the writing's on the wall. But at the same time, the tone piece is hard to get if you're feeding it, if you're going global data, because,
Right.
who creates the most content? I don't know these days. Who creates the most content in English? I don't know that either. Chances are it's not going to sound like a recovering CPA from Australia, as the output
Right.
into
At
that
least the
piece.
default.
So, yeah,
Right.
right. And so that's, I think, some considerations. Right? I always think about it as like an 80% head start. And then if you can make it private, it's sort of like it'll sound like you. And if that's the goal, that's great. Internal learning. People are dumping things into like big knowledge bases like Confluence, which is owned by Atlassian. It's what software companies use candidly most of the time to have all their knowledge in one place.
Yep.
We've now got AI search capability and things run across all of that. And so tagging, in addition to sort of like being able to query correctly, I think they've just launched effectively their GPT kind of search, but within Confluence at their last conference. You're getting to the point that if you document, to your point, all of your knowledge in one place secure, you'll be able to dump, leaders dump down information, and then people who are, more junior or perhaps less experienced through osmosis via GPT, you can actually kind of get the starting point. So when they have a conversation, hopefully they bring all those years of knowledge to the piece. I always argue with my managers growing up that we should, and this is 2007, it was like, can we just get like the Matrix had been on in the movies, right? It was like, can we just plug you in somewhere and dump your brain out? Because I had some of the most phenomenal managers and superiors growing up. It was just like, how do I get all the things that are in your head out so that we can democratize the information? I feel like we're finally there, minus the requirement to actually have them to
right.
jack into their brain. It's just the dump of all the information into one place.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know. I'm maybe one of the people that's maybe too tech forward in that regard, but I can't wait till the chip is available. Just makes.
Well, if you've got the watch on, they've probably or a phone. They're kind of halfway there, really.
Yeah, exactly. So as you think about, this technology and some of the ways that you guys are using it, both internally and across your different investments, from a product perspective, has Gen AI sort of changed your internal conversations about how you think about building product? And maybe that's sort of as opposed to, or in regards to, other machine learning and RPA kinds of conversations that have been going on, or do you just see this as just one more piece of kit that we can use? It's just another tool that gives us just different capabilities.
Yeah, probably halfway in between. So, sorry, I'm not trying to be a CPA and sit on the fence and not give you an answer, but we factored into our thinking when we're discussing what is out there in research phase. And then on the practical implementation side, we think about, how do we actually implement this? How do we make sure it's safe? Will people be okay with it? I'm investing in a company that does the reporting piece, out of New Zealand. They built the manual reconciliation screen tab for the AI generated forecast and scenario analysis and writing, so that there's a description of how it got to those things and almost a reconciliation, because people wouldn't trust the AI. And fair enough, you should, and I think that's a good lesson. It's it's probably 80% directionally correct. But we're not there yet in terms of trusting it. So I think, as we were talking about, content is an amazing piece, and that's where we've rolled it out and we'll continue to roll it out. We do what we call them sparkathons, but they're hackathons, and that's hackathon isn't a scary term. It's literally we've got ideas, go away and spend the day figuring out if we can implement them.
Yeah.
And so, off the cuff, spoken search to find things, speaking into a phone after you've met with a client, having that voice trigger AI to go and create things like a draft engagement that you probably still want to look at before you send it, but just post meeting or at a cafe or at your client's office. We're trying to figure out how to bring on those things because it speeds up the kickoff of the workflow. And then obviously the big thing for us, we have a lot of data around your pricing, your engagements, the services that you've deployed. And so we've kind of got the first step that will be coming, we'll talk about roadmap later, but advanced reporting. And off the back of that will be insights. And then you can imagine we get to the point where we're starting to suggest actions that you should take and this suggests process that you should do, and benchmarking that against your peers.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of direction of travel, but it's almost like a series of building blocks to get to that. And obviously, the faster and the better the compute power comes, as we progress, the more we'll be able to do in terms of, to your point, the RPA, so like the automations that happen off the back of AI. And from our experience, people want the automation, but also want the ability to approve the automation. So it's sort of like, I don't been to all these trade shows. It's the season for it. It's fall over here. I was adding to a Connect recently, and I think I was probably asked by one person, including during giving a presentation to a couple of hundred people on the stand, in meetings behind the scenes. I was like one person out of a couple of hundred that asked me about AI recognition.
So, interesting.
I don't think it's quite there, and you got to remember, like, where we're playing, a big chunk of the firms still have a big chunk of their core operating system, for the most part, on desktop. Ledger data being able to go into a tax return, as QBO to ProConnect, has only been available for 12 months. People still don't trust it. The IRS is still offline, as far as I'm aware. Offline in terms of like being able to automate data flows from there. So like, I don't think we're kind of in the world yet where everything is all connected, and it's like, how do I speed this up in terms of how you run the business, so to speak, and specifically around tax. I think we'll get there. I think we're sort of just on the journey. And so most people, in my experience, where you see the AI requests is around the marketing content, communication, how do I write this faster? That seems to be where people are really asking the question, based on just sideline chats. Because I will ask, if we were to go a different direction when we get to the roadmap, we can talk about it, but like, what would you want to see from us? And a lot of it comes down to, what would you do with the data? And then obviously they want to be able to communicate with their clients about stuff. So that tends to be where it's been sitting.
Right. Yeah, I think you said several good things there that I kind of want to poke into. And so that's interesting, first of all, that one of my questions was going to be around the market expectation. So it's interesting to hear that you're not, people aren't banging down your door saying, hey, I want these AI. They're still looking to solve their problems. And at the end of the day, how you interpret the problem may mean that you say, you know what, I know that there's this capability that AI affords us now that we maybe didn't have 6 months or 12 months or 24 months ago. And so we're going to use AI to solve that problem. But at the end of the day, they're saying, here's the problem I need you to solve. Right.
Correct.
And the other thing
as opposed to inserting AI is like, that is the only way to do this. Right.
Right. Absolutely. They're not coming to you saying, hey, will you use AI to do this thing? It's no, will you solve my problem? And I don't care how you do it, honestly. Right.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's interesting is you mentioned, and I have lots of conversations and I continue to hear this as well. And it's that, can I trust it sort of thing? It's like, am I ready for it to take action on my behalf without there being a check step? No, we're not. I don't think we're there yet. Right. In fact, I would say we're not even to the point where we're ready for it to propose solutions yet. Right. We need to continue using it. And that's sort of my big thing when I talk to people is engage with it so that you understand what's kind of going on behind the scenes, because in another year or 2 years, we're going to move beyond that. And you're not going to really feel the behind the scenes stuff. Right now, you're getting to interact with it in a way that you can kind of see the workings a little bit. As we progress, there's going to be more and more black box where the things are going to happen behind the scenes, and you're just going to have to trust whatever's going on back there is okay. And so using it now, you get to sort of feel that become comfortable with how the workings are going on. So it's an interesting time. So yeah, I mentioned I wanted to talk about the market perspective or the market expectations, and it sounds like you're not really seeing that. Do you feel like so? I was not at Intuit Connect this year. No, we just had that, this year. I was last year, and I remember kind of walking through the exhibit hall thinking, there's a lot of, we were just at that point 1 year on, and there was sort of still this hype around AI, and it felt like everybody had an AI message related to their product somewhere plastered on their banners. I'm curious, is that still, did you still feel that, or is it kind of tempering a little bit, and it's back to sort of more just like, here's the problems we're solving for you, and again, if AI is part of the solution, then sure. but it's not really the primary consideration for folks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's more the latter. I think that the places I saw it the most were anything around payables, so information collection. Yeah, I don't know how swearing goes on this podcast, but bad data in, bad data out means you can't do anything with it. And so,
Yeah.
anything around data extraction, processing, payables management, expense management, all those sorts of areas, big on AI. But once again, kind of expected that it's built into its data set and into its process. And then the other area was mostly around reporting. So once you have your good set of data for a client, and being interconnect was mostly CAS focused. So how do you go from processing to deliverable of financials, so the CAS process, and then those folks that are in advisory, how could you use data and data sets to then project the future and give recommendations to your clients to run better businesses? And so I think it was more with that realm. Anything outside of that, I think people just expect it, once again, built into the roadmap, but I don't think it has to be called out, to your point, as the thing. It's more, tell me how you're going to solve my problem and show me how. And if you've got AI, that's great, because I think that'll make it go faster.
Yeah.
It seemed to be the underlying tone, as opposed to tell me your AI strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So,
and I
so
think,
let's talk
to your
about
point, people have experimented enough, and they're like, well, it's kind of a false positive. You got most of it right, but not that. So it's like, I want you to use it to speed it up. And we're not there yet where it's got 100% trust, to your point, in the outcomes. And I think we get there as things get better. But I think that's also an underlying tone. There's a bit of skepticism as a result of that. They like the compute power and the speed.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned a couple of things that obviously that you guys have put into product already around some of the, using it to craft some of the descriptions and things like that. What are some of the capabilities that you're seeing, right now, that you feel like this generative AI is affording, that Ignition plans to take advantage of in the near to medium term here?
Yeah, I mean, I probably touched on that before, but just to reiterate, sort of the search side, so searching within data within Ignition. Communication side, so the service library creation, I imagine we roll it out across engagement letter creation as well, although that's a bit more legal, right? So it's sort of like,
sure,
you need to review this a whole lot more carefully. I think it'll come across more in the transcribing of an OCR, of a PDF or a Word doc into Ignition that way. And then we're heading more towards with what can you do with the communication elements of how do you communicate with your clients around the business conversation inside Ignition. And so, and I say the business conversation, meaning TJ, you're my client, I'm a CPA. Things around engagement, changing change orders, renewals, how do we help you get those emails so they sound more like you, using Gen AI. I think we go there, and then it's probably more future state. What do we do with all the data? Reporting insights, as we talked about before, but I think it's, I'm not sure if Gen AI as much as it leads into the so what, almost the RPA side of thing, based on big data sets, benchmarking recommendations, and whether or not you want to grow number of clients or grow the ARPA or the average revenue per client within your firm. So there's definitely directional things, but I think the latter is going to be the most valuable piece. Both for pricing, upsell, cross-sell, renewals, price increases per service line. That's kind of what we want to be.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the search and stuff like that. I think one of the things that interests me is the ability, specifically with generative AI around, I'm sure you guys have, so obviously you have a lot of structured data that you work with, but I'm guessing there's plenty of unstructured data that sits in the product as well, and across maybe some of your other investments. And I think the ability for, Gen AI to be able to make sense of unstructured data in a way that we haven't really, just speeds up that ability to sort of see into the data and be able to make sense of it without having to go through and have your data scientists sort of figure out how to structure it, how to, transform that into something that can be made sense of.
So particularly for benchmarking and pricing sort of standardization and seeing how you sit in the market, it's going to be really, really important. So you'd say the data in an invoice is usually structured, but the data in a timesheet is not. And also people call things different things, right? So a gold package for one firm might actually be a CAS package for bookkeeping financials, whereas another firm gold package might be the tax package with monthly check-ins on how you're traveling against your tax expectations this year. And so Yeah, for us, like that's a pretty prime example of like if we can't. It's very hard for us to structure something when you have branding rights over what you call something, and so we need to then go, okay, we can't just use the title; we have to use the description to then try
Right.
and normalize the data to give you accurate benchmarking. And trying to do that, to your point, one by one with text boxes are fairly unstructured. It's sort of like if we can use the AI learnings to be able to bundle that in, we can once again probably get you the 80% there, or like give you a median distribution curve, which should be roughly right in terms of what is the benchmark of the industry doing. So, like to your point, like I think we do that, and even though invoices, perhaps we're going to analyze those as we move into accounts receivable management as well. Like it becomes structured data. Once again, it's devil's in the detail. Apples are not always apples. It depends on which firm and what services they provide. They might call something the same thing. So
Right.
we're excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, maybe just taking a step back here. Again, Intuit Connect just happened. I know you were able to attend that. We got other conferences coming up. I'm curious to get your take on maybe just the general conversation that's being had in the industry. What are you seeing? Where do you see the wind blowing right now, and what are people trying to solve for? And what are the big issues, topics of conversation right now?
Yeah. The move to advisory, like the unlocking of CAS and then move into advisory, I think is where most people are seeing it. So, how do I learn more about an industry type?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, how do I get a data set? What can I put into ChatGPT? So there's so much public information from professional bodies, and I don't mean like our CPA or your local state CPA society, but like industry-specific verticals in terms of what they publish. And so the smarter firms who particularly, and I call them smarter because it resonates with how I ran my firm, they target a vertical so they can go deep and therefore boost the value they can provide those clients using those data sets to basically effectively form benchmarks, but using GPT to go and scale the web for those data sets and then compute them and then kind of spew out the how do you put it? I wouldn't call it a template necessarily, but effectively it's like, what are the trends in that industry? People either turn that into marketing content, which is killer because, GPT has automated a bunch of the research work, so you can actually, get there and point to the sources and reference them. And the other folks are using it for advisory pieces around how does my client compare against the benchmarks. And therefore you've kind of got like a level set. Obviously like anything, we'll learn a more specific set, the data can be more accurate. Whereas if you're going broad generalist, it's really hard. Like if you're trying to benchmark, is your client's business performing well and you're in the state of, I'm in Texas right now, you're in the state of Texas, you're going to get, massive oil magnate conglomerations versus, the local pub down the road on on 6th Street. And,
Right.
Once again, they may call something the same, weirdly named drinks versus, grade 10 oil. And maybe that's what it's called as an example. It's like, how do you parcel that data out? Whereas when you're in a specific vertical and less diaspora, if you will, or less spread of data, you can be way more specific. So I think folks are using it in that move. How do I get the data? What does it mean? How does that compare against the industry? And how can I be a better advisor to that business? Like I think that's the place we're seeing it being used the most. And I think that people are trying to double down on it. Candidly, I think it's a smart play.
Yeah. So, and some of that may play into the next question I'm going to ask here, but so let's put on our sort of move into dreamland here a little bit, so as we see some of the, right. So recently, we've seen Claude launch, I don't know how much you've paid attention given all your travels and everything, but so Claude earlier, this week actually, or maybe last week, depending on when you listen to this, but launched the ability for sort of this computer vision, right? It's able to actually see your computer and the technical behind the scenes we won't go too deep into, but it kind of takes a series of screenshots, but it has the power to actually move and click on different things and be able to take action. We had, ChatGPT launched search again this week after a long hiatus where they did not have search in there. And so they're, so there's continued advancements, right? We're continuing to advance and we're continuing to see new things come about at a pretty regular basis. I'm curious if you kind of put our dream hats on here a little bit. What do you see in the next, maybe let's start near term, next 6 to 12 months that people are gonna start seeing sort of in our products and things like that that are gonna have meaningful impact, right?
Ooh, I think with the search, so once again, if we just focus on right now, I feel like everyone's agreed it's like an 80% correct. So,
Mm-hmm.
when someone suggests something to you in product and it's a yes or no button, that's you actually contributing to a data set on, is this correct for that question, right? So it's
Right.
more learning happening. And then they can abstract that across the bigger segment of data as well. And so I think you're going to see, and obviously with the event search coming back, they're trying to prove whether or not they're getting more correct. And so I think was this helpful down the bottom? Would you use this information? And so I think we're going to see, as that becomes more confident, you're going to have would you like us to take an action off the back of this thing in future, which I think is what Claude's trying to get at. And then, from what we're seeing, this is the process, which is RPA, candidly.
Right.
And would you like us to do this process? We've noticed that you're doing these things every time this happens. And so I think you just see it start to get more and more, we seek your permission, we build a template around those permissions, and then we train, and then, as that gets bigger, they then suggest it to someone who they've never seen before, trying to do a similar thing, and, you're approving it because it looks like it's going to work. And so I think we're kind of at the next iteration of like, this is what we've learned. We want your approval. We're going to train our models, and then you set it into the template and you kind of set and forget, and maybe it's just exception handling becomes the next thing. Like, this is a new thing that in this flow we haven't seen before. What would you like us to do with it? And so then you kind of set a rule, so to speak, and then once again it applies across a bigger data set. So I think anything that's monotonous, repetitive, is just going to become a thing of the past, hopefully.
Yeah.
And the accuracy levels will start to get increasingly shockingly amazing. And so probably the most boring task that you have, which should become automated, but that all is on the, how would I put this? It's all on the expectation or the limitation rather of whether or not you've actually adopted the tech in the first place and you're happy to use it. But the folks that do will accelerate, because all the things that are transactional, we get into the future of the industry, transactional value against transactional processing will go.
Yeah.
And we'll be using software AI in the mix to get the data, transact the data, compute the data, right? And then it's all about what do you do with what it means. And I don't think it matters how good AI gets. There's so many things in our world that it just can't see, including like how someone feels when they wake up this morning. How does that relate to their ambition for future growth in their own business or their client? So like, I think the advisory and the what happens and the so what of the data is probably where we move towards. Hoping quickly, but I thought everyone was going to be in the cloud in the US in 2013 with APIs connecting all the data sets and into advisory in 2014, and I was wrong. So I think the change piece takes a little bit longer. So I would say it's maybe not 12 months that we see it all kind of instantly roll out. I think you see that it's a continual progression. Once again, that transactional piece moving to a thing of the past.
Yeah. So I like where you're at there, and I agree. Like, I feel like our ability to actually make the change, adopt the change is slower. Like, we can see it way before we can actually implement it, right? So I'm curious what the sort of looking even further out. Maybe we're 3 to 5 years at this point, right? And I know this is like the hardest thing because it's, I mean, maybe not as hard as 20 years, but right, 3 to 5 years is like, it's just tangible enough, but also like it's far enough out that who knows. So what do you feel like, what's like the one big thing that you maybe hope to see tangible here in the next 3 to 5 years?
I would just say just base level adoption and then transactional processing, because there's still a bunch of folks that don't believe in paying for software, even for payables, import and management, as an example. And so, it's not new tech. Like, I was a customer of Receipt Bank / Dext in 2009. Like, it's like company's like almost 20 years old. And huge amount of data sets, probably really good AI these days. Like, they spend less time, but as an example. And so I think you got to kind of just get on the train and stop putting your head in the sand.
Yes.
Like, that's the starting point. And the second point is just to start trying to adopt it and learn it. I remember when people used to get app fatigue, that was like a comment 2 years ago. I think, once again, I'm going to bark or pound on the niching. Like, if you focus on a couple of particular verticals, and you get really good at those, and there's only so many systems probably in the size range that your clients are going to be
Right.
going to use, and there's so many issues, and therefore applying AI or getting into reporting and being able to roll out all the systems that are appropriate and be aware of how the data is computed is actually a whole lot easier than being a complete generalist. There's a bit of risk associated with that. So maybe you've got 2 industries or 3 industries that are a little bit different. But it really depends on the size of the firm. But I think just like starting, to your point earlier, it's just like get in there. It's very interesting. I actually haven't installed ChatGPT for myself because I use it in so many places where it's like kind of native that it's like, well, like Google now has it rolled in, or their version in the search. It's just like, so what am I going to write? And maybe it's just me, or maybe it's because I'm an Australian CPA who's particularly minded. When I use ChatGPT, I tried using it to write emails. I ended up rewriting the whole thing because it doesn't sound like me. And that could just be my tone of voice, right? And maybe I'm not helping the algorithm by participating. But it's the voice to text is great, so I use that. But the actual like interpret what I'm going to say, or I want to write an email that does X, it usually just misses the boat. So I'm a huge fan. Adopted it in how we roll out things to solve bigger problems en masse. But to your point, the personalization, like it just doesn't, even that GPT that Chelsea and my team has come up with when it comes to write out its view, it's almost like it's normalizing my language, which is cool, but therefore it doesn't sound anything like me.
Right.
And that's the part I struggle with.
Yeah. I think I've similar experience. I've built sort of my own, TJ bot, that I feel like it does sort of get that like 0 to, I can go from maybe 0 to 60, 70% quicker. But I still have to spend the time on the back end, refining it and making it sound like I would not ever say that. So we're going to change that word or this sentence, so there's still that piece of it, but I still do find that it gets me that 70% pretty quickly.
It's great. So that thing is great for reminding me about things or presentations or documents I wrote. I'm old. I'm 40 now. So like, old. But like my memory isn't quite what it used to be either. So like it gets me to your point, a certain percentage of the way there, or even just rejigs my memory. Is like, oh, you got up on stage and you said X in front of 500 people 10 years ago. Like, oh geez, probably need to revisit that, or not quite make a statement, but it's like, I probably need to go back and better train this model, tweak that. So once again, at least to your point, awesome starting point.
Awesome. So last question that I have is, where can people find you? So what's the best way to stay in touch with what you've got going on and sort of what you're doing?
Find me on LinkedIn, Guy Pearson 1.
Good stuff. Well, Guy, I really appreciate it. So just to wrap up, first of all, if you're listening, feel free to give us a like, share us out to your friends. More people that listen, the more likely we're able to get awesome people like Guy on to be able to chat and share with us. So do that. Subscribe. We do have YouTube as well. I'll put all of that information in the show notes. I'll connect over to Guy's LinkedIn account as well, so you can follow him. So again, really appreciate you spending some time with this Guy, and for our listeners out there, really appreciate you listening to us. So take care until next time.
Thanks so much, TJ. Thanks for having me, and see you all at the next conference. Bye.
Sounds great. All right. See y'all.